Okay, so today I'm going to be discussing the development of young adults. So my two reasons for selecting this age group was first off, I myself am a young adult, and so I thought that this would be a good opportunity to kind of learn about myself and then also my age group as a whole. And then the other reason was because I think it's really fascinating how this is the beginning of adulthood and everything kind of comes from this beginning point right here. Yeah. So the first portion I'm going to be discussing is physical development. So people in their early 20s are often thought of to be in their prime of their lives for physical demanding work, easy production, and top athletic ability. However, unhealthy behaviors such as using tobacco or e-cigarettes can influence physical performance. Most individuals reach peak physical condition in emerging adulthood, and this is typically the tallest you'll ever be. Physical capabilities like strength, coordination, and dexterity hit their peak in late 20s or early 30s and then gradually decline over time, even for those who stay active. Because of this, few elite athletes remain competitive in their mid-30s. Sensory skills also reach their highest point in the early 20s. Eyesight remains strong until around middle age, when many people start to become farsighted and need reading glasses. Hearing often begins to weaken in the late 20s, particularly with high-pitched sounds. With so many positive signs of health during emerging adulthood, it's tempting to assume this phase of life is entirely healthy. In many ways, that's true. Most people won't be as healthy later on as they are in their 20s. Still, appearances can be misleading. The COVID-19 pandemic in 2020 revealed some key exceptions to this view. The brain also undergoes major development during emerging adulthood, particularly in how different regions connect to support complex thinking and emotions. Neuroscience can also make us wonder if changes in brain development explain shifts in behavior and thinking during this stage. Does it serve as a biological sign of reaching adulthood? Research shows that the prefrontal cortex, the brain area behind the forehead, which is key for advanced reasoning, continues developing until around age 25. Also, the link between the prefrontal cortex and the parietal lobe, located at the upper back of the head and involved in emotional processing, becomes more sophisticated. These connections keep growing into adulthood, bringing about further changes in how people reason and think. The key idea is that much of complex reasoning tied to adulthood becomes possible in emerging adulthood, but brain growth continues beyond just this. When it comes to behavior, emerging adults take more risks than any other adult age group. Many are drawn to dangerous experiences that push the limits of life and death, a concept known as edge work. Edge work appears in extreme sports like base jumping, waterfall kayaking, or free solo climbing, where one small mistake could be fatal. It's important to note that the difference between edge work, which involves high risks along with skills and preparation, and reckless behavior, which is risky but tends to happen impulsively. Those involved in edge work often connect with others who share the same passion, regardless of social or economic background, using these experiences as a break from daily life. Balancing strong emotions in dangerous situations is a fine line on how people manage this balance varies, often reflecting their upbringing and learned behaviors. Alright, now let's talk about smoking and drinking. Smoking, whether traditional cigarettes or e-cigarettes, is the leading cause of health issues. In the US alone, tobacco use and secondhand smoke result in approximately 480,000 deaths each year. On top of that, smoking-related expenses cost the country over $300 billion annually. The dangers of smoking are extensive. The accompanying figure, which I put to the right, highlights numerous types of cancers and chronic diseases linked to smoking. Additionally, smoking at any point in life can seriously harm cognitive performance in adults over the age of 50. The image represents that typical person trying to quit smoking. Most smokers, including those who vape, start during emerging adulthood, which means many make their first attempts to quit in their 20s or 30s. Over 90% of people who quit do so without medical or professional help, but the process is challenging. The majority relapse within 6 months of trying to quit, and for most, true success only comes after repeated cycles of quitting and relapsing. No matter how someone manages to stop, the health benefits are substantial. Within a year of quitting, the lungs recover their ability to clear out mucus effectively, and after about 15 years, the risk for stroke and heart disease returns to average levels. Even those who quit later in life experience significant health improvements. For more details and research, see the American Lung Association. Alright, now for drinking. For many college students, partying and drinking go hand in hand. Unfortunately, alcohol use on campus often exceeds moderate levels and turns into binge drinking. According to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, binge drinking is defined as a drinking pattern that raises a person's blood alcohol concentration to 0.08 or higher, typically occurring when men have 5 or more drinks or women have about 4 or more drinks within roughly 2 hours. Binge drinking has been considered a serious public health issue in the U.S. since the 1990s. Surveys of 18 to 24-year-old college students show that around 37 reported binge drinking within the past month, though this percentage has been on the decline. While attending college doesn't dramatically raise the overall chances of binge drinking, college students do tend to drink more heavily at social events, especially during their first 6 weeks of freshman year, a particularly high risk time. Younger students, particularly those aged 18 to 24, are more prone to binge drinking than their older peers. The risk increases when alcohol is easily accessible, when students are involved in fraternities or sororities, or when they have positive attitudes about drinking, which may lead to impulsive behavior. Alright, now let's talk about social and emotional development. Emerging adulthood represents a shift from focusing on identity to focusing on autonomy and formulating intimate connections. As individuals move from emerging into established adulthood, their personal and especially family relationships grow more complex. This added complexity leads to deeper connections between thought, emotion, and interpersonal dynamics. In the late 1800s, early psychology pioneer William James suggested that a person's personality traits are established by young adulthood. Some researchers support this view, and certain parts of personality stay fairly consistent across adulthood. However, as Carl Jung pointed out, people also experience meaningful changes over time, such as blending contrasting traits like masculinity and femininity. For adults of all ages, preserving a high quality of life is an important goal. According to the Competence Environmental Press model, being proactive and taking control of one's life plays a vital role in reaching that goal. Overall, well-being throughout adulthood tends to follow a U-shaped pattern as illustrated in the figure below. Adults in their later years often report a higher subjective well-being compared to those in their 30s and 40s, although the size of this difference varies depending on factors such as how much dissatisfaction drives motivation in a person's life. McAdams suggested that a person's identity is more than just a set of traits or a list of plans and goals. Instead, identity is shaped by a person's narrative, an internalized story of how someone came to be, where they have been, where they're headed, and who they will become. According to McAdams, individuals construct this life story with a beginning, middle, and an expected conclusion. This story evolves over adulthood as people grow and their environment changes, presenting new challenges and demands. Research shows that in Western cultures, people start forming their life stories in late adolescence and emerging adulthood, though these stories are rooted in early attachment from their infancy. Similar to Erikson's theory, adolescence marks the formal start of identity formation, with a coherent life narrative emerging. Through emerging and established adulthood, this story is shaped and refined through experiences and intimacy, while in midlife and later years it is reshaped by themes of generativity, integrity, and various life changes. Central to these life stories is the evolving sense of personal identity reflected in the emotions expressed, such as tragedy, hope, success, and struggle. Motivation also shifts over time and appears in repeated efforts to achieve goals. McAdams identified two major goal themes in life stories: agency, which includes power, achievement, and autonomy, and communion, which involves love, intimacy, and belonging. Life stories also embody a person's belief and values, an ideology that frames their actions. Each life story includes episodes that reveal perceived changes and consistencies in one's life. People demonstrate to themselves and others how they've changed or stayed the same by highlighting specific events that support their view. The main characters in these stories represent the roles people play and are often idealized versions of the self, such as the dependable friend or the hardworking employee. The process of integrating these facets into unified identity begins in emerging adulthood and remains a central task throughout midlife and beyond. Finally, the life stories require an ending, allowing the self to leave a legacy and open the door to new beginnings. Alright, now lastly, let's talk about cognitive development. So, post-formal thought is marked by an understanding that truth or the right answer can differ depending on the situation. That solution needs to be practical to be valid, and the ambiguity and contradictions are common rather than rare. Emotions and subjective factors often influence thinking, and ultimately, principled reasoning emerges from careful reflection. Research generally shows that post-formal thinking begins in young adulthood. Several research-backed models describe how thinking develops throughout adulthood. One widely accepted model focuses on the development of reflective judgment, how adults reason through the real-world dilemmas involving life experience, politics, identity, religion, science, relationships, and similar issues. Based on decades of both longitudinal and cross-sectional studies, King and Kitchener refined these descriptions and identified a clear progression of reflective judgment starting in young adulthood. Since the 1930s, scholars have agreed that intellectual abilities can be grouped as related skills, such as memory or spatial reasoning, organized into theoretical categories called primary mental abilities. Below is a longitudinal estimate showing how primary mental abilities change with age based on observed measures. Although people have the capacity for complex thinking, they do not always use it. But we may wonder why. Primarily because the environment rarely offers the support needed to apply one's highest level thinking, especially on topics where prior knowledge and experience already exists. Research on emotion in neuroscience helps explain why subjective well-being tends to improve with age. The amygdala, an almond-shaped cluster of nuclei deep within the brain, plays a key role in regulating emotions. In young adults, activation of the amygdala is linked to negative emotional arousal, which strengthens memory for emotional charge events. In contrast, older adults show lower amygdala activation and reduced emotional arousal. Certain neural pathways integrate cognition and emotion, providing a baseline for understanding what occurs when these connections are altered or missing. Studies clearly show that these pathways differ in some mental disorders. This indicates that adults without mental disorders have similar intellectual and emotional processing routes, whereas those with mental disorders exhibit alternative neural pathways. And then lastly, here is my slide with all my resources. Thank you.